Hello everyone, and welcome to the Nintex Workflow Platform Preview for SharePoint 2013. What it is, what it does, and what it means to you. I'm Mike Fitzmaurice, the Vice President of Product Technology here at Nintex. Joining me in just a moment, as soon as he gets audio worked out, is Richard Riley, the Director of Product Marketing for SharePoint at Microsoft. And without any further ado, let's have at it. One of the reasons we're doing this webinar is because we've been through the following thing before. SharePoint releases a version of its technology. Nintex releases value-added productivity software based on SharePoint. It's happened multiple times. And Nintex has responded by enhancing the heck out of what's going on every single time. With the advent of SharePoint 2010, not only did we evolve the workflow product, we actually started expanding it, including special extensions to make it work with Project Server 2010, and the introduction of Nintex Forms, and the cloud-hosted middleware that connects workflow and forms to the internet called Nintex Live. This is all well and good, but there's a new version of SharePoint on the horizon. In fact, it's already available today for preview, and there are inevitable questions as to what's going to happen next. That's okay. These questions, they're pretty typical. We're used to a lot of them. Will there be a Nintex Workflow 2013, Forms, Project, and so on? Will we be in the cloud? Will we have something on-premise? Will there be a transition path for those that want to upgrade or migrate or whatnot? And will the improvements that have been made in SharePoint be an issue for us? Well, the short answer to that last one is no. Actually, it's nothing but good. But the most important thing here is we want to answer some of these questions today. Certainly the questions that I've got listed here. I'm sure you have other questions. We'll answer those in the months to come. We're going to give you this answer in two parts. Part number one, I think it's important for us to, and this is why Richard is with us today, we want to talk about what's changing in SharePoint, because how SharePoint does custom applications is going through a fundamental shift. I mean, they're not getting rid of the old stuff for backward compatibility purposes, but the new app model is a completely different thing, and in my opinion, a completely wonderful thing. Richard will cover that, and then when he's done, I'll come back and explain to you what Nintex is doing with these changes. So, with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to my friend, my colleague, and one heck of a guy, Richard Riley, the Director of Product Marketing for SharePoint at Microsoft.
Good, thanks, Mike. That was one heck of an introduction. Great, thank you. Yeah, folks on the call, I'm going to probably spend about 15 minutes just running through some of the changes we've made and kind of where our heads were as we made these changes to the SharePoint developer model, which also, as you can probably tell from the slide, covers the Office developer model too. So we're putting the two together with this release. So, Mike, if you want to flip to the next slide, this kind of gives you a kind of view into our philosophies and kind of where we went with designing the new developer platform for both SharePoint and Office. We have a ton of SharePoint developers. That 700,000 number is actually reasonably old now. It's a huge number, and we are somewhat humbled by the number of people that develop on top of SharePoint. That is actually the number of people that say they develop on SharePoint in a kind of professional capacity within the last 12 months. So it's a big number. We also have an order of magnitude bigger number of people that use Office and develop against Office in some form, whether that's VBA, VSTO, even down to macros. We have a ton of people that use Office. I think the latest numbers that were released were around 1 billion users of Office today. So again, that's a massive number. So we looked at a way that we could kind of bring those two worlds together, but also align with where the industry is today. And when you look at what developers are out, the tools and the technologies that they're out using today, They're very web orientated, and that's not necessarily something that we have done in the past to kind of target Office and SharePoint in a real way. So when you look at where those trends are heading, like there's a ton of developers using HTML5 and CSS today. 75% of developers say that they've used HTML5 in the project over the last 6 months. And there is a proliferation on the web of kind of open APIs. Kind of what we wanted to do with the model is, in the approach that we've taken, is to kind of hit the puck of Office and SharePoint development towards these people and towards the tools and the techniques that they use. So we're not going to ask people to go and try to learn a new platform to be able to code what we call in apps for Office and SharePoint. And our guiding principles, as we've kind of gone through this process, are designed first and foremost for the cloud. We want the extensibility model to be very, very cloud friendly for developers and for customers that are actually running these apps within Office and SharePoint. We also want to enable a consistent platform, so that's kind of talking back to the Office and SharePoint statement earlier. We want Office developers to be SharePoint developers, and we want SharePoint developers to be Office developers. And this is a real significant change for us in this release, where we can honestly say that if you can write apps for SharePoint, it's a very simple thing to translate those skills into the Office world and vice versa. It's essentially exactly the same thing. And in doing so, we want to give developers a choice of not only tools, of the things that they use, but the languages that they use and the hosting providers they use to host apps. And basically across the board, we want developers to be able to use the things that they're familiar with today and bring those into Office and SharePoint in very new and interesting ways. So the result of all of that thought and just over 3 years hard work from our engineering folks is a new cloud app model. And the 3 areas that kind of are easy for us to talk through in what that new cloud app model actually means are we're enabling a new set of applications. And this will become clearer as I kind of go through this deck a little bit and as Mike shows you the demo in a second of what specifically Nintex have done leveraging this new model. But it really does enable new scenarios both within Office and SharePoint and new ways of obtaining like an end user kind of obtaining and using these new kind of applications and new scenarios that apps create. As I said a second ago, that we want to give developers a very comfortable feeling that if they know web technologies today, then they can go write apps for Office and SharePoint. Mike, I'm going to click a couple of times to slide build as it goes along. And then finally, flexible lifecycle, and I'll talk more about these 3 pillars in the slides to come, is the capability of an end user to go to a repository, either an internally hosted store or a public store, find a solution to their problem, either buy it or download it for free, install it with a bunch of IT control there if required, and then use it both within Office and SharePoint. And again, I think the work that Nintex has done here is a great example of kind of how this plays out specifically within SharePoint, using the store as that delivery mechanism and then kind of putting the product in the hands of basically anybody that's got access to the store within SharePoint. So what are apps? A kind of a key point to take away is that we don't necessarily want everybody to go away and rewrite what they've done in the past in this new model, like point for point. There are lots of new things that you can create and you can enable with this new model just by the sheer fact that it's web-based and kind of and cloud hosted. And this will become clear as especially I think as Mike gives the demo and as I go through the deck, that the apps within SharePoint are not necessarily the same as features and capabilities that you would have historically added with full trust code. Apps do new things for a new set of consumers, a new set of people, end users using SharePoint. And a great way to kind of visualize that, if you imagine a Kindle app, say Amazon go and create a Kindle app for SharePoint, at first take that kind of sounds a little bit strange, having a Kindle app within SharePoint. But then imagine, Amazon adding a send to Kindle link to every document library, every document within the document library, that you can just go in, you click the Send to Kindle link, and within a couple of seconds you've got that document that was in the document library in SharePoint now synced to your Kindle, and you can go jump on a plane or get in the car and you've got that document going with you. There are a bunch of new scenarios that this new app model enables that we really want people to think about differently and understand the capabilities of what we're giving them with the new model and kind of write experiences that really do change the way that people use Office and SharePoint. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. This is specifically an example or a screenshot of Excel. This is everything you see here is essentially equally at home in SharePoint because the code and the way that these apps kind of render themselves within Excel, it works exactly the same way within SharePoint. So this is an app or a set of apps that we built for the Olympics that lives within Excel. On the left-hand side, you can see a task pane. Essentially, think of this as just a web page. Like there's a bunch of JavaScript sitting behind that task pane that's off talking to Azure to get data back. And then there is a JavaScript object model that sits behind the Excel spreadsheet that the task pane can talk to interact with the Excel spreadsheet directly. It's exactly the same thing happens with SharePoint. Only rather than a JavaScript object model, we've got a JavaScript client-side object model for SharePoint and a bunch of REST endpoints that you code, talks to SharePoint to, does its thing, and then renders itself back in SharePoint. And this is a real good example of where we bring kind of the world of Office client development and SharePoint development together, and because the hosting and the app that's sitting behind the screenshot you can see here is exactly the same thing. So think of where the square is around the number 2. That's actually a very kind of active. If you grab the bubbles, you can swing them around and they kind of bounce around a little bit. The JavaScript and the HTML5 that's sitting behind that little app that's living in Excel could equally be bound to a list within SharePoint, and you get exactly the same experience. As could the map. You know, imagine binding the map to a list of geographic data within SharePoint, and you're going to get exactly the same thing with the map. So it's kind of a little bit of a you kind of need to flip the bit in your head to think about what apps actually mean within Office and SharePoint. And I'd say the easiest way to do that is to go download the latest the beta version of Office, install some and set yourself up with an Office 365 tenancy, and just go to the store within SharePoint and go to the store within Office and start installing some of these things, and suddenly it starts to click, and you can kind of see the interactions between the two and how we've hopefully enabled a very kind of powerful platform underneath and around the Office and SharePoint products for developers to do some really, really interesting things with. So, Mike, if you want to just flip to the next slide. So, what is an app? And kind of how do they live? So think of an app essentially as a web page, and it's a web page that can in the SharePoint world that can talk to SharePoint using a JavaScript object model. It can talk to a bunch of REST endpoints that are sitting against your SharePoint server, and it can get the data that you want the app to have. It does its thing, and it has logic that runs server side, like in the cloud on Azure, for example. And the end result of that is a kind of a web page that your app presents back to SharePoint. The apps can be hosted literally anywhere. Our tooling is optimized for hosting the apps within Azure, but essentially any web stack that you want to throw at us, providing it can interact and support things like REST, you can write and host apps in any stack you want. So it could be Azure, it could be a LAMP VM within the Azure VM service, or it could be on Amazon AWS. We've got a very open model here in the way that we're building these, allowing folks to build these apps. And the key thing here is think about apps not living within SharePoint, and this is a kind of a key differentiator between what we've done in the past with full trust code and what we're doing in the future with this new cloud app model. Historically, if you've wanted to customize or change or add capabilities into SharePoint, it ran as full trust code, and you kind of needed to know SharePoint inside out to be able to insert yourself into the right places in SharePoint and navigate the the very rich API, full trust API that we provided for you in the past. And that code ran in process. Like if that code wasn't necessarily optimized or there was a bug in it, it could do things to SharePoint that you wouldn't necessarily want to do to SharePoint. It needs to be installed by an admin. It wasn't something the end user could do. But there was a ton of power and flexibility in what we gave ISVs and developers to go do with the platform, from 2010 backwards. Now imagine a world where the app is not installed or run or hosted within SharePoint. So what happens is, a user goes to the store from within SharePoint, and I think again Mike is going to show you this experience when he runs through the demo. They go to the store. They find an app that they want to install. They click the install button, and essentially all that does to SharePoint is create a reference within SharePoint to a URL somewhere outside of SharePoint. As well as doing that, it prompts the user to say, this app requires access to this PCS connection, this document library, the kind of data that the app is going to need to run. The user hits OK, and that's essentially exactly the same model that Facebook uses when you go and install a Zynga, Zynga game or something like that. You install the game. You say, "Yep, I'm going to give this game access to my to my wall, to my friends, and to my social graph, and whatever else." You hit OK. The Zynga then reaches back into Facebook to get the data it needs to run. It does its thing, and it just renders itself within the Facebook UI. And think of exactly the same thing happening with SharePoint, except it won't be a game. It will be something like Workflow, where you'll install the app, you'll ask for the right permissions, you grant it those permissions, and then the app runs outside of SharePoint. If the app breaks, SharePoint carries on running. So it's a very different model. It's a very modern model, and we really do hope we've kind of modernized the experience that both end users get and developers get for coding against us as we go forward. So Mike, if you want to flip to the next slide. So to give you a kind of a 10,000-foot view of what the architecture looks like of what we've built, essentially the things to take away from this slide are we have the same model for Office 2013 and SharePoint 2013. So apps are built with a HTML5 CSS UI, and then sitting behind those UIs there's a JavaScript model, and you can leverage things like OAuth and OData to get data and authenticate your app to your service backend. In the case of Office, that JavaScript object model is something that allows you to interact with Office content, i.e. the paragraphs and content within a Word document or cells and tables within an Excel spreadsheet. Within SharePoint, it allows you to interact with a bunch of SharePoint data, lists, libraries, documents, that kind of stuff. And then as we drop down to the bottom within the services, the key to what we've done is that the model not only works synchronously or in parity within Office and within SharePoint, but also within an on-premise deployment and a cloud deployment. So anything that you write now within this new model will run equally happily on-prem or in the cloud. And that's been a big gap for us in the past where if you wanted to write or customize Office 365, for example, you had to write it in the sandbox, or you had to do it, client side. There were a bunch of kind of restrictions on what you could do against SharePoint within Office 365. And you clearly got a whole heap more flexibility on-prem because you owned the servers and you could install that full trust code and essentially do whatever you wanted to on-prem. In this new model, exactly the same app will run exactly the same way, whether you're running on-prem or in the cloud. Those JavaScript object models and the resting spaces and all the rest of it are identical across on-prem and in the cloud, which opens up, again, a bunch of new opportunities for the way that we can kind of extend people's experiences both on-prem and in Office 365. Mike, if you want to just flip to the next one. And then very quickly, we have given people a couple of ways to actually deploy and obtain, kind of acquire these apps once someone's written them. There are two ways, essentially. The first way is through the public store. So today, if you go to office.com and you hit the store link, you'll see an experience there where you can go and buy apps for Office. we have a very similar experience driven by exactly the same Microsoft backend infrastructure for SharePoint, from where within SharePoint you can hit the store, it will take you to an experience within SharePoint. You can search for apps, you can find apps, you can rate apps, you can install apps, right from within the SharePoint UI, the SharePoint environment. We also allow an internal version of that public store, which is what we call a corporate catalog, where IT can approve apps and push apps into that corporate catalog and then allow people to install apps from that kind of internal store. These can be apps that your organization has written themselves. They can be in-house apps, or they could be apps that have been purchased from an ISV such as Nintex that are sideloaded into the kind of the corporate catalog, the IT approved store, and then pushed out that way. So we've been very careful to kind of balance the capabilities that end users want, in the sense they want to go find apps and solutions to fit their problems, with the requirements and the governance requirements of IT, where they can actually layer a very rich kind of approval mechanism over the top of this acquisition process. We'll just move to the next one. So in summary, the mic is called so you can click. In summary, the cloud app model for SharePoint provides developers with a very, very rich choice of the tools they use and the hosting providers they use, plus a bunch of flexibility in that to build this new class of apps that I've just very quickly kind of blitzed through. And we really do think that it will change the game in the way that people interact with both SharePoint and Office. And I think when you see the demo that Mike's about to do from Nintex, it will give you a kind of a bit of an eye-opening experience around what used to be a very kind of IT-intensive process of obtaining the product, installing it, and then letting users get it. To I have a need as a user to run some kind of workflow over some kind of process, and I can go as a user directly to the store, obtain something that's going to fit my requirement, install it, use it, without, if you set it up this way, without IT ever getting directly involved. And if they want to get directly involved, then we provide a bunch of capabilities for them to control that experience on top of it. So what can you do to get started today? Well, if you actually want to go build any of these apps, I would recommend you head over to dev.office.com, sign up to be a developer, and you can kind of take a walk through a lot of the stuff that we've built. And there are a bunch of videos on the site that you can go take a look at. We have a blog, which is msc.com/v/officeapps. There's a growing number of really good articles on there of kind of how to get started and that kind of stuff. I think Mike can take it from here, where you'll actually see that they've been working with us for around 12 months through the TAP programs to get started at a very early stage in our development process, and gives a bunch of feedback, which has resulted in the app that's in the store today that Mike's going to kind of walk you through in a second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. As a matter of fact, Richard did a press tour a couple of weeks ago showing reviewers what is being done with the Office 13, SharePoint 13 platform, and was kind enough to cite Nintex as a very good example of what can be done with SharePoint, and there's been some notice in the trades and so on. But enough of all this. Let's talk specifically about what Nintex is doing for SharePoint 2013. Actually, let's talk about what Nintex is doing for SharePoint 2013 right now. And namely, that's the Nintex Workflow Platform Preview for SharePoint 2013. Admittedly, it's a long name, but it was a very carefully chosen name. This is not the final name. This is the name for what we've got out there right now. It was released within just a couple of days of when SharePoint 2013's public preview went live. And at this point, I should actually qualify this statement. It's not the most installed app in the SharePoint Store, period. It is the most installed third-party app in the SharePoint Store. That said, it's a lot of downloads. I'm actually very, very, very pleased at the reception we've been getting. It's been very kind of everyone to do that. It is designed, the platform preview, to work both with on-premise SharePoint and with SharePoint Online. So no matter how you've deployed or are playing around with SharePoint 2013 right now, you can make use of the Nintex Workflow Platform Preview. Specifically, here's what's going on. We're starting with the way Nintex Workflow 2010's designer looks. Not attempting to create a whole new user interface optimized around SharePoint 2013. Not for the platform preview. What you see when we ship our actual product for SharePoint 2013 will look very SharePoint 2013-like. That said, if you know what Nintex Workflow 2010 looks like, you'll be very comfortable with what the platform preview looks like, because the goal was start with the concept behind Nintex Workflow 2010 and then change everything behind the scenes. First off, instead of it being trusted code that gets installed on-premise, it's now a SharePoint 2013 app built on the new model completely. Secondly, there's a new workflow engine in town. It's called the Windows Azure Workflow Service, and it is specifically designed to act as a separate workflow service that's tightly, deeply ingrained with SharePoint, but it is separate to SharePoint, so it's independently scalable. It's based around Windows Workflow Foundation 4.5. It's a very, very, very nice thing, and we talk directly to it now. And the whole thing is written in HTML5. So any modern browser from anyone, we should be fine. In fact, in order to get something submitted to the App Store, the Microsoft's testers go ahead and check you against every one of the usual suspects. We know we're working in Chrome, in Firefox, in Safari, and Internet Explorer, and all of those are tested both on Windows hardware and Macintoshes. So, oh, right, there is one other key detail. This runs entirely from the cloud. If you've got a local deployment, that's fine. The design service will be brought in from the cloud and will run against your local environment, but it's a cloud-hosted app. You'll have more deployment options when we ship the real product for SharePoint 2013 once that ships, but for the platform preview period, everything is coming out of the cloud. In fact, why don't I just show you everything right now? Some of you may have downloaded this already, but what the heck? I think it's a great idea to give you a sense of what's going on. So here I am looking at a SharePoint 2010 site using Internet Explorer, and here's what I'm going to do. We're inside of a site called Demo2, and the only customization I have done here is to add one Word document to the default document library. Otherwise, this is as plain as it gets. Now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come up here and choose Add an App. And what happens now is you're presented with the list of apps. And some of these are just simple lists or web parts or what might have been classified as features in the past. And you can request things, you can get a catalog of apps you can add. I'm going to go to the SharePoint Store. This is that external catalog of apps. And there are a number of apps here. The one I care about the most is right here, the Nintex Workflow Platform Preview for SharePoint 2010. You hover, you can get more detailed information and so on. Let's go ahead and click that. And here you get a nice description page. If you're familiar with app stores for Windows Phone or for iOS or other platforms, this should be a very familiar experience. You get details, you get reviews from other people, and you get a sense of what permissions are going to be requested. In fact, in this particular case, we present a privacy statement, terms and conditions, and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you what, all you really need to do is come up here and click Add It. There it is. You're being asked if you're going to trust the platform preview, and it tells you exactly what it's going to ask for. It wants full control of the site, and it wants to be able to access basic information about users. Now, please don't panic. Let it have full control of the site is a temporary workaround. Not everything is finished in SharePoint 2013. We're in a preview, as in beta period, and at the moment, fine-grained trust is not completely fleshed out. It's getting close to that point, but it's not there yet. A workaround that was agreed upon between the SharePoint guys and Nintex was our platform preview would have full control, would be allowed to have full control just so that it would work. It won't need full control when the real thing ships on the real version of SharePoint. But Microsoft has looked at our code, decided that it does no harm, and therefore gave us a dispensation to access with full control. That's very temporary. Don't worry about it. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to click Trust It. And the gears start grinding. There we go. It's loading the app, pulling it down. There actually isn't much to pull down, a little bit of XML configuration data and a few graphic images. And at the moment, the app is being added. And in just a moment, there we go. Nice orange icon. And we're ready to begin. Now, a couple of things happen once that has taken place. Let me go ahead and refresh the page. You'll see that it's a recently added thing. You'll show up inside of site contents, and that's where you would go if you wanted to, or click here if you wanted to create a site workflow. I want to create a workflow in a document library. And so if you're familiar with the way Nintex Workflow already works, you come up here and click, and it says working on it, and now the page is being loaded from our app, which actually lives in Windows Azure. And we're interrogating information directly out of the SharePoint site right now, figuring out which activities I'm allowed to use. And in just a moment, I should see the design surface appear. Now, this at the moment, I mean, we're in beta land. So while this loads, the very first time it loads, it takes a minute or so for this to load. While this is going on, I'm going to flip to another tab in the exact same site. I need to make one slight adjustment. We'll get past this in an update that we ship in several weeks. But right now, we'll create a couple of lists automatically. We need to adjust one list. See, this is a workflow tasks list. And it's missing one thing. So I need to come in here to list settings. And I need to come here and choose add from existing site content types, because the list that gets created already accepts tasks and summary tasks. These are normal tasks, but we need it to take workflow tasks. So all we need to do is come down there, SharePoint 2013 workflow task, and add it. There we go. We're good. We can get out of here now. And in the meantime, the design surface has popped up. And we give you links to Nintex Connect, which is sort of like MSDN or TechNet. It's a community site with forums and downloads. Links to our product site, a link to go ahead and submit content, suggestions, bug reports, and such. And then finally, this one, where you go and design workflows. So again, if you've seen Nintex Workflow 2010, this should look really, really familiar. And there are an array of activities over here, including links to a lot of actions that come from Nintex Live. But the stuff I care about most, let's go right here and start dragging and dropping. What do I want to do first? Oh, this is just going to be a simple document approval. And not every activity that we know and love is available today, but if you wanted to show this to someone else or try this out yourself, I'll show you how to do a document approval workflow right here, right now. So we're going to assign someone a task to review a document, and then based on the choice they make to approve or reject, we want to do something. So let's go to Flow Actions and go to a conditional branch. Based on what happens, what do we want to do? I'll tell you what. let's set the workflow status appropriately depending on how things work out there. And then based on when the whole thing is done, we probably want to send out an email as well. In fact, I'm going to do some copy and paste work here. So let's start with there. Let's go ahead and assign the task. Now, this is the second thing about pre-release beta proof of concept type software. The platform preview does not yet have a people picker in it. Wish it did, it doesn't. So it will soon, it doesn't yet. We will be updating this in not in a matter of days or a couple of weeks, but in a few weeks. In any case, the participant needs to be expressed as a user ID, and SharePoint now defaults to claims identities. Rather than me typing this, I'll show you where you get it. Let's flip over here to a different environment. By the way, that was Internet Explorer running in Windows. Here is Mac OS X, the Mountain Lion version, and it's running Safari. Everything still works. Here's what I need to do. I'm logged in as a different user. This is the user that I will assign the task to. If I go to his About Me page and edit profile, I should get a link that I can use to find out his user ID, and it fits a very consistent pattern. It's this stuff at the beginning, and then it's just his normal ID. So let me grab this, right? Copy. Flip back over here, and now paste. That was the only weird part. Everything else here behaves pretty normally. The title of the task, I'll just make this test 1. I'm not going to bother with a description or a due date, but I do need to configure some of these other options. So, assignee options. I'll wait for the task to complete, and I will send out reminder emails every day, just once though. And it's going to auto send some email, and I do need to provide body text. This is a temporary limitation, but it does very much exist right now. So let's say test 1 assigned. Here under the overdue reminder, let's go ahead and type in test 1 overdue. Under the cancellation email, in case somebody opts to cancel it, let's throw in test 1 canceled. And then under outcome options, actually there's nothing to change here. You choose the content type, which field will be used to bring back the outcome, and what the default is. The outcome itself needs to get stored in a variable. So let's create a couple of variables very, very quickly. I need to create a variable to hold the outcome. And this will actually be an integer. It's an index of which of the responses was selected. And then I also need a place to put the task item ID. Good. All right, so outcome goes there, task item ID goes there. Click save. We're good. And notice how now it's nice and dark and happy as opposed to orange with a warning icon and so on. A couple of little things we did with HTML5. Also, hover over a drop zone and we throw a little circle around it to zoom in on it. All right, the conditional branch, let's just open that up. What we're going to do is check to see if the outcome equals 0. 0 would be the first item, which in this particular case is approve. 1 would be reject, and so on and so forth. And all I really care about is whether it's approved. Here under setting the workflow status, set it to approved, and then here under email, now sending an email, this works normally. You just put in an email address, no funky ID specification, like Fitz at we go. Subject test 1 approved. Okay. Now the reason I didn't put anything over here is because I'm just going to paste. Do the same thing here. Copy and paste. And of course, I need to change this. Not approved. There could be multiple options, but it's either approved or it's not, in my opinion. Not. And not. Good. That's it. We have as a workflow. Let's go ahead and go to publish. Here's some of the settings. Let's call this test 1. We'll put the tasks inside of this list. We'll put the history there. Actually, that's a misnomer. We aren't really writing history entries just yet, but we will. The real product will have a lot of history control. Let's see, start options. Manually is good enough. I don't want this to be triggered by an automatic entry of any sort. Okay, well, let's click Save. Now, a couple of things are happening right now. We've sent off a request to have the workflow validated. We give our service a workflow diagram. It gives us back the new dialect of XML being used to describe workflows. I say new in terms of new to SharePoint. Workflow has been published. Great. I am a happy, happy guy. So we converted the workflow to XML, sent the XML to SharePoint. SharePoint published the XML on our behalf to the new workflow engine, and we're ready to go. So here's what I'd like to do. Flip over here. Let's run this thing. Click. There's it. Workflows. And run. That's it. Workflow is underway. In fact, let's watch it. The detailed tracking of workflows is a regular feature of Nintex Workflow, but it's not in the platform preview. So you just get this simple tabular representation of what's going on, and the workflow has started. In fact, if I come over here and I take a look at what has happened so far, a task has been assigned to Brett Campbell. Great. It just so happens that if I flip over here, I am logged in as Brett Campbell. I no longer need to get his profile details, so let's get that out of here. We even have an email telling him that that task was assigned to him. Great. So let's come over here. Let's refresh this view of the site so that he can see the workflow tasks. And here's this one here called Test 1. Great. Let's edit this. And we should see that there are options to approve, reject, or just make some changes and save or cancel. I want to approve this, so I click OK. Task is now completed, and that means the workflow should complete. Let's flip back over here and refresh and see what happened. Yep, workflow is completed, user status is approved, and I think I heard a little message that, nope, I am mistaken, it's not here yet. We've had a few inconsistencies with email. Oh, there it is. My apologies. It's working rather nicely today. For the past 24 hours, mail has been coming through into Office 365 a bit more slowly, but it's coming in nice and quickly now. This is fantastic. Okay, it was approved. It all worked. I love it when a plan comes together. So let's set things up for the next demo. And back to the slides. Let's explain what's going on now. Here's what just happened. You're sitting at your browser and you're navigating to a SharePoint site. And really right now, you're working with two sources from two places. There's SharePoint itself. This might be in the cloud. This might be on-premise. And There's also Windows Azure. Again, the cloud. In our case, this is a developer-hosted, self-hosted app as opposed to an auto-provisioned Azure app. But it still is never, we have chosen to host it in Windows Azure. We love Windows Azure. We're .NET people. It's a perfect place to put it. So in SharePoint land over on the left, in this particular case, in the example I just ran, it's Office 365. But you have SharePoint itself, and then you've also got, there isn't an official logo for it, so I'm just using the .NET logo, the Windows Azure Workflow Service. Over in Azure, there's the Nintex Workflow Platform Preview application. So these two things will work together. When you're viewing a site from SharePoint in which the platform preview has been installed, you see a few extra user interface elements. For example, the Design a Workflow ribbon button. So if you click that, here's what happens. First off, SharePoint sends down a page. That page is very, very thin. It's little more than a frame. It's one big iframe that takes up the entire page, but the fact that there's a wrapper that comes from SharePoint is very, very important. It takes care of the authentication, it takes care of context information, and then it will in turn load our page and pass information to us so we know who you are, we know which site you're working against, we know a whole bunch of other things. So, and trust relationships have been set up and everything works rather nicely indeed. So there you go, you're looking at our HTML5 application, which runs happily in multiple browsers. That application makes heavy use of JavaScript. That's okay. SharePoint has a really nice JavaScript object model, so if we need to get information from SharePoint, we've got it. For anyone that was working with JavaScript to get at SharePoint 2010, this is a great leap forward in terms of functionality. In fact, the APIs in SharePoint in the new model are fantastic. We've got access to virtually everything we could care about. The stuff that isn't in the higher level object models is there in the lower level REST APIs. It's really nice stuff. So once everything's been designed and you click publish, we send the diagram to our preview service. It grabs that for a moment, renders it all as extensible application markup language, an XML description of what we want the workflow to do, and then we push that to SharePoint. SharePoint, this is the new app model. SharePoint doesn't keep the workflow. SharePoint passes the workflow to the Windows Azure Workflow Service, and then the Windows Azure Workflow Service registers that and hangs on to it. What will happen immediately thereafter is SharePoint will subscribe to that workflow so that it can make use of it. Now, when you go to run a workflow, it will happen one of two ways. Either you do something that causes a workflow to start, or you specifically request that a workflow take place. Either way, once it's triggered, the workflow engine is in control. If it needs to talk to SharePoint to read or write something, it does so. And given the extra work that we've done, if it wants to grab some information out of the cloud or do some cloud-based operations, we've used Nintex Live in order to help it communicate with cloud-based services, including dealing with all of the callback logic or token redemption logic or crazy authentication schemes and so on, things that would not be easy for the engine to do all by itself. So that is how it works. This could be on-premise, could be cloud. This, totally cloud. And this, well, this is you. Now, this is an important distinction that I need to make. I've made it before, earlier in this webcast, but I need to make it again. The platform preview is not Nintex Workflow 2013. There will be a Nintex Workflow 2013. It will ship as soon as we can after SharePoint ships, but we reserve the right to have a new interface. We reserve the right to have many, many more features, many more value propositions associated with it. Nintex Workflow 2013, it will be an integrated, lovely, complete solution-based product. The platform preview is exactly that, a preview of our use of the new platform. Do not expect to find a lot of actions. Nintex Workflow 2010 has more than 100 actions in the box. The ones you'll see in the platform preview are the ones built into SharePoint, plus what we provide through Nintex Live. Don't expect to find governance things like tracking and statistics and careful security as to who can do workflows and who can use which activities in workflows and all those other things, and the ability to create user-defined actions to encapsulate logic and reuse it. That stuff will be there in the final, in the real product. It's there already in 2010. It's not there in the platform preview. Elaborate UI. We'll do a refresh to the platform preview to include a people picker and maybe one or two other things, but the countless little things we do to reduce the number of steps you need to create a workflow, we have not obsessed over recreating everything in our UI in the platform preview. We're obsessing over doing that and more in the real product. And then finally, there's no go live license. Please experiment with this all you like. Validate it for yourself that we know what we're doing when we're talking about the new app model, the new workflow engine, and HTML5. But this is for evaluation and preview purposes only. Nevertheless, it shows the viability of the new SharePoint app model. The fact that we were able to build a workflow designer that runs out of the cloud and works seamlessly with on-premise and online SharePoint is a very, very good testament to what the app model allows. It also shows that we know what's going on with the new platform. We've been working with it for a year. And what that means is that we're spending our time on genuine innovation. We're not spending our time playing catch-up with this new platform. We have not been caught by surprise. It is something we understand and know well how to work with. We're showing you just enough to give you an impression that we know what we're doing, that we have learned what we have to learn. And it's a correct impression. It happens to be the truth. Now, let me go back and do one more demo very, very quickly. I've got one or two slides before we go to questions and answers. But I want to show you one other thing that's very, very cool. And in truth, you can do this demo on Nintex Workflow 2010 or 2007. And because we are pressed for time, I'm going to open up a workflow that already exists. Let me show you what I'm doing. Let's go over to another site. Go here to the document library, open up the Nintex Workflow Designer. And what we're going to do, this will be a social workflow, social business process. In this particular scenario, I have a workflow here called Yammer Test. This is not a bad workflow at all. In this particular example, we send out a request to a Yammer group asking people to review a document. And then we loop until we see that the review has taken place. We give it a pause so that we aren't checking constantly. There will be, ultimately, just like we have in 2010 and 2007, a wait for change or a wait for update. But that's not a built-in action from SharePoint. That's something that we did, and we will implement that for the real product. But right now, we're looping and then checking to see whether or not a property has changed by comparing it to the previous version. This is stuff that's in one action in the real product, but you can get this done during the preview. And then based on the change, we thank everybody, or we remind them that we'd like this to, like them, please, come on, it won't be too hard. I'm just going to run this workflow quickly so you can see what it's like. Let's pick, Burning Man checklists. Let's go to workflows and run this. Okay, it's running. Let me show you. Let's go over to, well, let's see, that was one guy running in Safari. Let's go to Chrome. Logged in as yet one more user. This is a guy named Eden Stafford. And what I want to do is come over here to Yammer, and let's refresh. It shouldn't take long for a new message to appear asking people to review the document. But it has not happened yet. It can take up to a minute or so, 2 minutes at most, for this to appear. Remember, Yammer is not running in Office 365. It's an external service. And so the workflow runs, it sends a request to Nintex Live to access Yammer on my behalf. Oh, and if it's never run before, the workflow will go ahead and ask me for permission to act on my behalf. I can grant it or revoke it or refuse. But if I grant it, then it doesn't have to keep asking me over and over again. And here's that new message. Please mark up this document. Okay, I'll do that. Let's come over here. I believe it was Burning Man checklists. The quickest way to do an update to this is just to edit the properties and save it. That'll update the last modified date and time. There, updated a few seconds ago. Let's go back over to Yammer and see what happens next. Now, I may have missed the point of no return where it once again asks if we can go ahead and mark this up. So I suspect I'm going to get a polite nasty gram in a moment that says, come on, it's not that hard. Please, please do it. Oh, no, I did it in time. There's the thank you for marking up the document. And if I come back over here, I should see that the workflow has finished. Let's have a look. There it is, completed. Fantastic. Okay, social workflow, it's a reality. So let's talk about what I can tell you about Nintex Workflow 2013. Obviously, we're working on it. We'll tell you a whole lot more in the months to come. But this is important to make sure you understand today. The examples that you've seen run with the new style Windows Azure Workflow Service model. They're new style workflows. We understand this stuff just fine. And whether you're working in SharePoint Online or SharePoint 2013 on-premise, we can design new style Azure workflows for cloud and for on-premise. But there are still old school workflows to be considered. For those of you that migrate up from SharePoint 2010, you'll have a lot of workflows that need to continue to run. And for that matter, if you are using SharePoint Foundation in 2013, that can only run old school workflows, SharePoint 2010 style workflows. What's the difference? New style workflows are run by the Windows Azure Workflow Service, and it's .NET 4.5. Old school workflows, the SharePoint 2010 style, these are actually run by the SharePoint web front-end servers, either by timer jobs or when some change gets made to content, and they're based on .NET 3.5. That's okay. We have you covered. On-premise, we will continue to run SharePoint 2010 style workflows and help you design them as well. So wherever you're going to put SharePoint, we're going to be able to help you. Perhaps one more thing. Nintex is all about workflow for everyone. We do a fine, fine job of this. That's our goal. Our goal is to make sure anyone with a good idea can put it into practice, and that it is easy to manage, easy to create, easy to modify, easy to improve, easy to communicate, easy to understand, all that stuff. That's our goal. Nintex is not about plugging feature gaps. It's not our goal. So if SharePoint adds more features, that makes us happy. It means we can focus all of our energy around things that make workflow more quick, more easy, more productive, more powerful. So Yes, improvements have been made to built-in SharePoint workflow. We are thrilled. We actually have a proven track record of adapting to those improvements in the platform. So from 2003 to 2007 to 2010 to the new 2013 model, we have had prompt releases of software. The transition has been orderly, and if you have software assurance with Nintex, we have protected your investment moving from version to version. So, thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased that you were able to hang out with me for the last hour. And Richard, I think, had to leave a few moments ago, but he thanks you as well. And with that, I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Wow, there are plenty of them. Great. Let's see. Oh, okay. A number of you said you had trouble hearing Richard. Sorry about that. You will probably need to explain SharePoint 2013 to your director. When will this presentation be available? We are recording it. It will be available in just a few days. You can either go straight to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nintex, or you can go to nintex.com, click on webinars, click on past webinars, and it'll be there. Yes, we started on app development, but then we went into what the app is that we built. Let's see, in our assigned task, why don't we have variables to assign the task to? It's because it's not, this is the platform preview. That's one of the many, many things we left out of the platform preview. Will there be some sort of custom action mechanism in the final product? Yes. Anything that we're doing in SharePoint 2010, Nintex Workflow 2010, our design goals are to start with that and go well beyond it for the 2013 issue. I'm not going to promise that it's a perfect one-to-one mapping, but it would be, we definitely don't want to leave something that's in 2010 not implemented in 2013. So it doesn't matter if SharePoint is on-premise or on the cloud. Will the new Nintex only run in Azure? No. The platform preview runs in Azure, but it works whether you have SharePoint on-premise or online. The final, or the real Nintex Workflow 2013 product will have options for being deployed as on-site code or can run in the cloud. You will get, no matter how you're deploying SharePoint, there will be a version of Nintex Workflow 2013 for you, and forms, and so on. Will it still be possible to use Nintex locally without using Azure? Yes. I should probably be a little bit careful about this. Microsoft, are calling the new workflow engine the Windows Azure Workflow Service. It's not necessarily running in Azure. Right now, Azure means all the online stuff. I think they're evolving the Azure brand to mean other things, but no, if you install the Windows Azure Workflow Service, it is a locally running service on-premise. It's called Azure. I wish that they didn't. It's actually built by the App Fabric team. If there are no internet connections for some hours in the platform preview, then you can't use the platform preview. But again, there will be on-premise options for the real product. For 365, yes, this runs in, well, it depends on what you mean by 365. We won't do anything for Office. We will not attempt to make the platform preview run inside of the SharePoint 2010-based version of Office 365. But the SharePoint 2013 preview that's also available through Office 365, yes, of course we will work for that. In fact, that's what I just did in my demos. Will Nintex 2013 have a way of handling failed workflows? Yes. We will have a lot of different kinds of options because the engine has become considerably better. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of you are asking questions about whether this only works in the cloud and whether or not it runs on-premise, and the answer is both, but you queued up these questions earlier, perfectly fine. Is it possible to answer tasks in Yammer? Yes, very, very soon. Current version of the Yammer activities in Nintex Live, it's write status updates. We'll soon be able to read as well, and we'll continue to do more with that. Obviously, with Microsoft's acquisition of Yammer, we're extremely interested in supporting it in every possible way. We are adding some Yammer activities that will be available soon, more Yammer activities, and the list will just get bigger. Can you use Nintex 2013 workflows with SharePoint 2010? No, but SharePoint 20 or Nintex Workflow 2010 will continue to be sold and supported for a very long time. In SharePoint 2007, Nintex Workflow 2007 is still being sold and supported. No change. We depending on what version of SharePoint you've got, we have something to work with you with. Do I see the app model change the channel and selling Nintex? Oh, that's an interesting question. I think it'll provide more and more options. Nintex works with a wide variety of partners to build solutions around our product. That will not change. We love working with partners. It's a partner-driven business, and we want to make sure that our partners are well looked after. The SharePoint Store is a good way to deliver software. Right now, if you look at how Nintex Workflow is installed, it happens in 15 minutes, but it's an MSI that has to be deployed to a web front end. In the next version, it's a click here to install, and it's done very quickly. Installing Nintex Workflow has never been a tough or difficult thing to do at all. And it's become even easier. That said, how to use the product best, how to build solutions on top of that, everyone continues to be able to provide the expertise that they've provided, and everyone we will look after business relationship-wise. For 2010 environments migrating to 2013, would it be easy to migrate the Nintex 2010 workflows? That's absolutely a goal of ours. There's an expression, the devil is in the details. We are working through those details right now. So it is a design goal of ours, first and foremost, to be able to allow you to run those workflows unmodified in SharePoint 2013. We will make good on that. It is a second goal after that to be able to evolve those into new model workflows. Again, unless there's something that absolutely blocks that from happening, we want that to happen. Can't promise it yet until we've worked through all the details, but we're working on that right now. The XML specifications for a 2010 for a .NET 3.5 workflow are very different from the specifications for a .NET 4.5 workflow. But again, we are hard at work on that. We want you to be able to do that kind of thing. The platform preview is hosted in Azure. The final product can be hosted wherever you want it to be, including just running as a part of SharePoint. So Nintex is always run on as a seamless part of the SharePoint infrastructure. That doesn't change. It either runs as a part of on-premise SharePoint in 2013, or it runs as part of the cloud if you're using Office 365 or hosted SharePoint or such. So it will work, but in the platform preview era, yes, you must have internet access. Is there any limit on workflow XML, workflow actions, and so on? We haven't implemented 100% of everything in the platform preview, but everything will be implemented in the real functioning product. And again, we'll have support for the built-in workflow actions provided by SharePoint. We will add many, many more of our own. And then we'll also use Nintex Live to expose even more that represent cloud services. Does the Azure platform improve workflow stability? Yes, it improves stability, it improves performance, and it improves functionality. Will there be a PowerPoint version of our presentation? I'll look into whether or not we can share the slide deck itself. But a lot of the slides contain just a few words. They're there as background for me explaining things. I'm much more happy with you using the recording as opposed to working with the deck. Pricing, Pricing information will be forthcoming much more closer to when both SharePoint and we ship. Licensing model, what will happen with it? Again, that's sort of the thing we'll be able to answer much more closer to release time. The thing I can say is that if you've invested in earlier versions of our technology, we will protect those investments as you evolve to SharePoint 2013. We will do our level best to do the right thing in virtually every scenario. Are there any plans to introduce a Nintex Forms platform preview? No, I don't think we're going to have the bandwidth to provide a platform preview for the next version of Forms. That said, we'll be releasing an update to Forms in the next couple of months that will contain more and more features which can give you a sense of some of the things that we're doing for the 2013 era. But no, platform preview for workflow, yes. Platform preview for Forms, no. Any limit on workflow size? Excellent question. I do believe the SharePoint team is imposing a limit on the size of the XML file that you can publish. That said, it is possible to break a workflow up into chunks and reusable components. And so functionally speaking, workflows can be, the workflow solution that you author in Nintex Workflow 2013 can be massive. The fact that we might break it up into chunks behind the scenes isn't something you have to be concerned with, and will reward you for thinking in terms of reusable components. We've already moved towards that direction in SharePoint 2010 with the user-defined actions concept we do in Nintex Workflow 2010. We'll keep moving in that direction in the 2013 era. Let's see. I mentioned before that the workflows for version 2010 work on the SharePoint web front ends, but I mentioned a new service associated with the 2013 product. The name of that service is the Windows Azure Workflow Service, and it runs wherever you want it to. You can run it on a dedicated machine. You can run it on the machines that run the web front end processes, but you really don't have to. You can run it wherever you want, and you can load balance it. It's a wonderful thing. All right, lots of good questions. Thank you for staying after.